Hi. Hi,
Hey,
everyone.
Morva, nice to see you there.
Nice to see you as well. Thanks for including me.
Of course, no, thanks for stepping up. It's like I said, we literally it was like last night. I think you had me in
Yeah,
the
it
before.
was.
Hey, can you do it? Like, yeah. I'm like, I'm on holiday. I'm like, thanks again. So look, let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit about the Canadian Web3 Council and what their primary objective is.
Of course. So the Canadian Web3 Council is a not-for-profit trade association for the Web3 sector in Canada. So we're effectively an advocacy group focused on working with governments and regulators to advance the growth of this sector in Canada from at least a policy perspective. My background is in public policy, and I'm a lobbyist by trade. So we're effectively a lobby group, and we're the primary voice for the industry to governments. So our work includes responding to consultations, educating members of parliament and regulators about, how we can advance this sector from a public policy perspective. We have members. Our membership is diverse and consists of your major crypto trading platforms, like some of those that have joined us today, to hackathon groups like ETH Global, backed by the Ethereum Foundation, to blockchain products and developers in this space. And these are just folks who have chosen to invest for the next few years, at least, in lobbying the government and making sure they understand the importance of this technology and making sure that we get regulation right.
Fantastic. So basically trying to push the needle for the Canadian Web3 sector with some of these politicians who maybe not be super educated.
This is
No,
a safe space. Yeah.
I'm half joking. I'm
Yeah.
half joking there. No, that's great. I'm pleased to hear that there is some because I think with the regulation and policy, technology is always moving faster than the government regulations can keep up. So it's great to see that the Web3 Council kind of picking up the difference there. And tell us about the regulation of the Web3 sector in Canada and globally, and what it means for the industry exactly.
So we're actually in a very critical moment right now. It's part of the reason why I'm here, because I think that the more people know about the time that we're in right now and the importance of it, the better. It's a critical moment in Canada, the US, and Europe. Regulators are looking at how to capture all sides of this industry, ranging from crypto trading platforms, which I think is the furthest along from the regulatory perspective, to NFTs, to DeFi, which is coming up next. And what matters a lot is the scope and the tone from these governments. And I would say Europe is the most balanced right now. They're trying to introduce consumer protection measures in consultation with the industry. It's not perfect, but it's workable, and it's attracting a lot of investment and a lot of projects to go to Europe right now because of that legal and regulatory clarity that they've provided. They're probably furthest ahead out of the three. And it's enough that it won't stifle growth, in my opinion. The most hostile jurisdiction, in my opinion, right now is the United States, because there's a lot of lawsuits. You may have read about it recently. And Canada, as usual, is somewhere in the middle. So they've taken a very risk-averse policy of containment. So they're not trying to stifle the players that are here right now and folks who are here right now. They're not trying to break their backs or anything like that. But at the same time, they haven't made compliance easy. We still need a ton of legal and regulatory clarity from regulators in Canada to be able to attract more talent here and more projects here. So it's now more important than ever to be involved in the policy making process through groups such as ourselves, or just individually as yourselves. And it's now more important than ever to present a united front to governments.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I mean we could talk about the regulation for hours. But one thing I have seen is a lot of buzz in the industry about. I mean, when crypto first came onto the scene, you had all these TradFi banks saying like, "Oh, it's a scam, it's blah blah blah, it's this and that and the other," and now they are singing a very, very different song. They're wanting to get in on it and kind of regulate it. And well, everybody wants to make their piece of the crypto Web3 pie. And I think I even heard BlackRock are getting into a crypto EFT or ETF. So interesting stuff there. Yeah, we'll watch this space. Fantastic. Thanks so much.
And I think as we see more demand from institutional investors or traditional folks in this space, that also puts, because regulators right now are reacting to the growth of this space, but they're also they also proactively have to address demand from newer players in this space who want to invest and who want to be involved.
Sure. And what are some of the main challenges you see for the adoption of Web3 tech in Canada?
I would say just generally mass adoption. There are a lot of hurdles to it. I mean, we've done our own polling, internal polling of Canadians to see how they feel about this space, crypto specifically. And obviously, right now, generally with the economy, people are in a risk averse space. Like a lot of people, with interest rates and inflation. So generally, people are going to be risk averse about anything, but specifically when it comes to this space, folks are very, very risk averse right now. So the biggest challenges I see is one, I would say, just generally bad actors in this sector that affect the reputation of the sector. But then secondly, I would say like the technologies and the products are too complex right now. I'm not crypto native and I had a pretty hard time. I've been in this job for 2 years now and I had a pretty hard time understanding what's going on. And we need to get to a place where we're not just promising, down the line. We're not promising things to people anymore. We have to demonstrate our value now. And the average Canadian, at least, doesn't understand what that value is. So I would say those two things: products and the space and the technology is too complex. We need to make things more user friendly. And then secondly, we need to really weed out bad actors.
I think the demonstrating value piece, I was talking to a crypto blockchain Web3 investor a couple of days ago. She was going to present here, but she's had some things last minute. And she was talking about the VC scene at the moment and how 2 or 3 years ago, investors were like FOMO big time, just like throwing money at Web3 and
Yeah.
metaverse on the speculation that, oh yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a gamble. Like, oh, hey, maybe you guys will hit it big and you'll get a bunch of users. Now in this kind of risk averse environment where, as I said, high interest rates or this type of economic pressures, that's not so much the case anymore. And if from what I'm hearing, hashtag not my opinion, opinions of much smarter people than I, it's not, you now need to start generating revenue to close funding in this Web3 space. It's a lot more difficult, I guess, where I guess in some SaaS and tech, a lot of tech companies, they're not profitable. I mean, Uber just got hit profitability this year. So yeah, some interesting talking points there.
I mean, if the investors are not seeing the value, how can we expect the average layman or average person to see the value? That's why the regulatory environment is so important, because that gives investors and Canadians confidence. If things are regulated and if there's legal clarity around what the rules of the game are, I actually think that's how we get to mass adoption.
Yeah. And I think as well, just to talk there as well, just a little bit about why this industry is so difficult for people to wrap their head around. I mean, we have a lot of boomers who can use Facebook, but now you're talking about like NFTs and
That's correct.
digital money. It's what I found quite interesting and challenging for myself as well, even kind of working in the sector and recruiting in this space. It's not just technology now, and it's not just finance. It's they just mush these things together, and now we have to have a good financial literacy plus technology for the, I mean, even the average person in tech, I think would have a difficult time
Yeah, and like
technically.
what is the value we're giving to people? Are they saving money? Or are things happening faster? Why should Canadians love banks?
Mm,
They love the security of their banks. So
mm.
if we're just talking about DeFi and crypto, for instance, like what is like the tangible value we're giving to people? And they need to see it now, and it needs to be clear, and it needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be regulated.
Yeah, yeah. I think a cheeky little shout out to Neo Financial disrupting the banking space, $1 billion tech company, kind of doing a tech bank, which I think I'm all for that, because I think the banks have a big monopoly, but always room for a bit of disruption there. And yeah, so wrapping up here. So what excites you most about the Web3 movement, and how do you envision it shaping the future of the internet?
I would say consumers having more choices when it comes to their finances and what they do on the web, especially content creators, like artists. That excites me personally the most. But listen, we may never get to 100% decentralization, at least, talking about Web3. But having those options available is how we educate people and how we slowly move towards progress. And personally, I think like Twitter, for instance, is a great example of why we need a more decentralized web. So, and why we need to give people more choices, especially content creators, and over what they do on the internet. So for me, that's the most exciting thing. And when I talk to policymakers, that's what excites them as well.
Yeah, I think the whole Twitter or X now and Facebook Meta thing is just controlling the flow of information, really. And I think Musk saw how much influence old Zuckerberg had over there at Meta, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to get me a social network too." Lost a ton of money. I don't know what's going on there, the full story, but yeah, I think it's definitely kind of controlling that narrative. And I'm a big advocate for decentralization and kind of giving power to the people from their data and ownership of assets and such. And so what would you say some of the most significant challenges you've encountered while working on policy and regulation in the Web3 space? And how does the council approach overcoming those?
So again, elephant in a room is bad actors. FTX, Celsius, massively, massively unhelpful to put it lightly in our relationship with regulators. I mean, we had public pension plans in Canada that had invested in those ventures. Not a great look for us. Politically, we've become a very easy target because if I'm being very honest with you, not a big space. Like we're not creating 5 million jobs in Canada right now, right? We're small and it's a bit of a chicken and egg right now. What comes first? Good regulation, then growth, or growth of the sector, then good regulation. So we're kind of stuck in a hard place right now. And like I mentioned, like products are confusing and they're even more confusing for regulators. There's a lack of consistency in what things mean and how they work. And so how we're approaching to overcome them is like providing some consolidation of like helping that education, helping governments understand what things are, what they mean, how they work. That's the first step. And then the second is just that regulatory advocacy piece. So having credible, good actors come together, bring their legal, regulatory compliance, technology expertise and providing that to governments to help them understand that the credible parts of this sector, which is, the majority of this sector, are working very hard to build things that, people now and people in the future would want. And that's why that advocacy piece right now is super important because we do have quite a lot of challenges working against us.
Thank you very much. And the last one before we wrap up your little powwow Q&A here. What are your predictions for Web3 regulation and what do you think we can expect over the next few years?
I think we'll definitely see more regulation in the next few years. They won't be ideal, I'll be honest, but they'll be workable for established players because they're the ones at the table right now and they're the ones dedicating government affairs, lobbying resources to having those conversations. So the good actors, I think we'll see some wins for sure. It will lead to some centralization and consolidation, especially with regards to crypto trading platforms. So the areas of this sector that are not decentralized, we'll see more consolidation of those. It's too soon to tell what will happen with DeFi and how it will be regulated. I think Europe will have the first crack at it, and that will be a big indication of where things could go in Canada. But everybody should expect that within the next 2 or 3 years. And all that to say, it's like, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is all why it's more important than ever for the industry to invest in lobbying and advocacy and to be a part of the conversation with governments to shape the policy landscape. Because like I mentioned before, we do have a lot of challenges running up against us. And at the same time, a lot of activity is happening. And oftentimes, from government's perspective, governments are notoriously reactive, right? We will always see governments more active in times of market downturns, in times where the challenges are high because it's their job to protect consumers and to protect their citizens. So we kind of have to get used to this and we kind of have to get used to investing resources behind having those conversations with governments when there's a market downturn. Because frankly, those are the times when government is actually most interested in regulating things and to kind of shape it. So we really need everybody to get involved now. And I do predict more and more folks will be getting more involved in the next